question. Can anybody hear my background music? Okay, I think there's something wrong. Let me go grab my tea and I will be back and try to troubleshoot and set up at the same time. So hang on, everybody. Uh. Oh, there I am. Oh, I can only handle a couple of things breaking at once. It appears that in my absence, my music has fixed itself, so let's go. Oh no. Oh. All right. I hope everyone else is having a good day. Don't mind me and my tech issues. It's just a day. Um, it's a day that ends in Y. Tech is gonna be weird. Um, Also, I apologize because in a minute, you're gonna hear me getting my tea stuff all set up. Um, I am drinking tea from the Rin Fair, and uh, it's one that I was able to custom design, and I kind of want to remake it because it's good. But my first thought upon drinking it was, oh, it's meat tea. Because it's lapsang souchong, and so it's a very smoky flavor, and it tastes good. But also, I had mixed in other things to, like sharp fruits to cut it, and they have not cut it. Like, they show up at the end, but they haven't actually survived the steep very well. That, or I somehow managed to get a T-ball with none of them in it. Which is entirely possible, I suppose, but bet on me. So yeah, go to Ren Fair, design your own tea. If your Ren Fair does that, like. So we are going to be doing a book that kind of saved itself at the last minute, and the reason it was hard to read is not because it's a hard read, and I will get into all of that. If you didn't check the description this week, this one is going to be somewhat spoilery. I have not put as much of my opinions up in words because my opinions are very spoilery, and so I'll probably go into those a bit when we get there. But yeah, this is one of those books where there's a lot about it I like. Oh, excuse me. There's a lot about it that I like. There are certain things about it that I'm very confused as to how that happened. And then there's parts of it where I don't get it. I will say, and this is not spoilery, this is the first YA book I've read in a long time that have been recently published, so there's that fun double caveat there. That has actually felt like YA and not like teen, because it's set in a college atmosphere and the goings-on feel like college things because, oh, here's the expectation of you going to class, but also it's not like your teachers track you down. Which was very much my experience at college. Like, you got to know them and they could know you on sight, but also they wouldn't necessarily be like, why weren't you in class? Unless it was like one of your main professors. Though even then, I don't think any of my professors were like that. There is my tea all set up and ready to go. And it does still smell all nice and smoky, so it makes me think of like a mesquite. That's exactly what it makes me think of, is like mesquite chicken or mesquite marinated steak. So it may not be a fact that it tastes like meat, it's just meat is what I associate that taste with. Alright, but into the actual book, and not my weird tea choice for the week. As per usual, this is meant to entertain and inform, and I do not hold any of the rights to the works described. And I hope you will enjoy. There we go. So this is Curious Tides by Pascal Lascelles. Yeah. So let's talk about this one a little. The publishing details: it was originally published in 2023 by Margaret K. McElderberry Books. It is part of a series. It is the first book in the Drowned Gods trilogy. I didn't know that until today when I was looking up what the series was called. It's a good thing I didn't know that until today. And this is the original cover. The original cover is by the illustrator Signum Noir. So here's the first time this has happened. I was able to find social media for this illustrator, but no biography or anything like that. So you can find them on like Facebook and Instagram. I didn't notice if they were on X, but since I don't have those platforms by choice, I couldn't really look around much, but I didn't see any kind of bio for them. But I was able to see several of their illustrations. They're very dark, whimsy, Poe-esque. It's all super pretty, very, very gothic themed. It's delightful. I really did like their art. Blacks and silvers or blacks and golds. And there's a special edition cover of this book with the exact same design, except everything you see here that is teal is in fact purple. And that is the copy of the book I have. Also, this was a blind read, if you couldn't tell by how long it took me to read, and it was a gift. And oh boy, I did give the gifter updates as I read. And we'll get into why I was giving them updates as I read. But it's a super pretty book. So about the author, similarly to the illustrator, there was limited information, but I was able to find more than I did about the illustrator. The author is I didn't put her name on this page. That's my bad. She is a Canadian author with a bachelor's degree in French literature. She's written 2 novels, Curious Tides and Stranger Skies, as well as a short story all set in the same world. Yeah, so this is the current state of her literary works, although I doubt it's going to be the end. At the very least, there's one more book in this series, and honestly, with her world building, I hope she keeps going. I may have to read Stranger Skies, although I did read the blurb on her website, and it was both encouraging and terrifying at the same time. But we'll get into that in a bit too. So what do you need to know about this? It has 2 point of view characters. It has a very interesting magic system. It deals heavily with survivor's guilt, and it is a very slow read. There's a big old caveat on very slow read, because this may just be a me problem. And I will acknowledge that. So your main characters, you have Imri Ainsliff. She's also called Im or Ains or just Ainsliff. She's got several nicknames. She is a healer whose best friend and roommate died the previous spring in front of her. And she returned to college to find answers. And I say that because she couldn't bring herself to go to the funeral of her best friend because trauma. But she did return to school, less because, oh, I need to go back to school, and more because I want explanation. And then you have Baz Brisden. His full name is Basil. I'm assuming, since it goes to Baz and not Basil, I'm just making an assumption here. He's sometimes just called by his last name of Brisden. He is a walking, stressed out, nervous time bomb, and he is the brother to Imri's now deceased best friend. He's a firm believer in control and caution in all things. He doesn't take a lot of risks. He's very much the quiet recluse type. He is obsessed with a particular fairy tale novel within the book called The Song of the Drowned Gods. That is him in the briefest of nutshells. 2 point of view characters. It's Imri and Baz. Annoyingly, for me, and this may just be a me thing, Imri's chapters, you know who the POV character is because each chapter has their name at the top on the first page. And Imri's chapters say Imri. Full name. Even though she may not be called by Imri, she may just be called Im, or she may just be called Ains. Whatever, says Imri. Baz, who has a full name, and who occasionally is called either by his full name, rarely, or by his last name. It's just Baz on his title page, and it's like, either do full names or do nicknames. Don't... The dichotomy annoys me a little. It's not actually a problem. It's just an observation that was one in a bunch of observations. The chapters alternate evenly, so evens to odds, it splits. I think the epilogue is technically impartial. I'm not going to tell you who it mostly follows, though, because that would be spoilery. With the exception of a couple of dreams or nightmares, and there's a few, like, mid-chapter flashbacks, which are very rarely much of the chapter, and the book keeps moving forward, so you don't like, skip back in time when you flip to the other character. Usually. There's a couple of times that happens, but not often, not significantly. For the most part, the book moves forward in time. It does have a couple of time jumps that I think are handled pretty well, in that it's just sort of hand-waved, and now it is this time. It's like, oh, we have 3 weeks till this thing, and you flip the chapter and you switch POV and you're like, now it is this thing. But I will say I do think that's done very well. It's not hard to follow whose perspective you're in, or anything like that. Oh, excuse me. So this has very interesting magic. I'm going to try to explain this in the least spoilery way possible because the magic itself is such a big part of all of this. Oh, is my tracking off? Hang on, let me see if I can fix that. Let's see if I can fix that. Okay, is that better? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so the magic is tied to two-ish things, and the ish will make sense. It's tied to the phase of the moon and the state of the tides. So the college and the world is split into 5 houses while you're at college, and then it's just 5 signifiers outside. There is an additional caveat, and I'll get to that later. You have the house of the new moon, waxing, full, waning, and the eclipse. So the eclipse is where the ish comes in. So the eclipse house and the eclipse powers aren't determined by the tides, but rather by the type of eclipse, so solar or lunar. Whatever phase and or state the moon and tides were doing when the character is born determines their type of magic, but not necessarily their strength or their innate talent at that magic. It determines what their magic is. So like a healer is a healer, but how strong they are at healing or how clever they are with that healing, that is determined by mostly the person, it seems like. Some believe it's the bloodline. So the other caveat that doesn't come in super early, it's mentioned. Excuse me. It's mentioned, but not really a thing until around the middle-ish of the book, I think. Look. The first, 350 pages were very hard for me to read. Yeah. Oh, 350. Closer to 400 pages were very hard for me to read. I had to do math. It didn't work. The other state of people is those who are born So everyone is born with magic, but if they have very little, they essentially have enough to ease a thing, but not enough to actually be magical, if that makes sense. So no one is without magic, but some people don't have enough to actually use it as like a big, flashy, impressive thing. For some of them, it's this little quiet blip. But the magic thing is super interesting. Survivor's guilt. Both main characters lost the same person, who is deeply important to both of them. As I said, we're going to talk more about this, but I didn't want to write it all down. If you want to read this and don't want spoilers, turn away now. Because survivor's guilt is a big thing, and to explain how well it is handled, we're going to get into some spoilers. So, I love you so much. Watch the VOD after you've read the book. The character that they lost, Rami, which again, like Baz, goes by her nickname through 99% of the book, has a full name. Anyway, they both kind of describe her as a force of nature. She is bold and fearless, but she's also flighty and flits from one obsession to another. She was, how do I do this without absolutely spoiling everything? She was in a sea cave that is known for killing students because the tide washes in unexpectedly, with a bunch of other students doing weird stuff. When M found her and accidentally joined in, we'll say it that way, and M was the only one who made it out alive. The other 8 students died there. And Emery's memory isn't super great about it, but like she remembers she was there and then she wasn't there when the bodies washed up on the beach. So, she basically saw her best friend die and didn't understand it, and like, Rami had been drawing away from her and becoming more secretive, and she was very upset about this, and like all reasonable things, really. And then for Baz, the brother who was scared of everything and the sister who feared nothing, and it was that kind of dichotomy of everybody is scared of him because he is eclipse born. They have weird, super cool talents, and like their magic is even niftier than everybody else's. And then, like, the person who pulled him out of his shell and who tried to make him do things and who wasn't scared of him, importantly, dies. And he's alive. And there's survivor's guilt on both sides. And he's also dealing with the fact that his father is in prison and his mother is basically a shell of a human. Out of grief. I would like to put that out there. She is like that out of grief. It's not some weird curse or any of that nonsense. So both of them go through phases in the book where they try to convince themselves, oh, I'm doing this for myself, or oh, I'm doing this for Rami, or oh, I'm doing this for whatever the romance interest is, without spoiling the romance stuff. And it feels very believable of let me dive headfirst into this thing because I don't want to deal with the the consequences of what actually happened. So maybe if I find the answers to why, maybe I'll feel better. Maybe Rami will come back. Maybe everything will make sense. Maybe it'll all be worth it. And I'm just gonna say it. It's kind of sad. It is very well written, but it's kind of sad to see them go through these phases and how they deal so differently. Baz, who very much likes Emery, and she's more than just a connection to his sister, but also she's a connection to his sister. His need to do everything for or in memory of his sister is less than Emery, who was there. But it's a very good telling of survivor's guilt and how it can take different forms with different people, and yeah. To be fair to Baz, he also has survivor's guilt from a different thing that happened in his life. So for this, I'm going to go a bit off the beaten track and talk about more about the magic, specifically about the fact that the Eclipseborn have this thing called the Collapse. Basically, it's you use your power up to the edge of your ability, and then if you push past it, basically your power breaks free in an explosive reaction that does a whole bunch of damage. And if people are nearby, it does a whole bunch of damage to the people. And the stronger the Eclipseborn is, the more damage their collapsing does. Baz was present and a kid when his father collapsed. So, and people died in that collapse. And half of his survivor's guilt is from that. So it's a thing that he has carried around since he was a child. A thing where he was so happy and excited, and like Emery made him feel special, and then suddenly everybody's terrified of him because, oh yeah, Eclipseborn can collapse and cause all this awful damage and are weird and creepy, and we don't actually like you, and we forgot we don't like you. So Baz has that survivor's guilt in addition to his sister, and then Emery just has, the 8 people that died around her. No big deal. And then there's this one. All right, this book is very slow. It picks up in the last 50 to 75 pages. If those 50 to 75 pages weren't there, I wouldn't even have read the blurb for the sequel. That being said, my problem, and my biggest problem, is that the magic was interesting, the world as it was built was interesting, the characters were not. I've described them as beige when I was telling the friend who gifted it to me. I'm like, oh, they're very beige. They're not really beige, they're gray. Because like some of them are warmer or cooler toned, but like there were things where it's like, here's this character. I'm clearly supposed to have these opinions about him. He's clearly raising these flags, and I'm just like, I don't care about you. You're so boring. Like, everything, the world, the college, the magic, everything was interesting except the actual characters. And then, we met 2 side characters. One we met primarily in flashbacks, before we met him in person. Excuse me. And the other one was like name dropped twice, but they didn't actually explain how he was important. And then he showed up and we understood how he was important. Or how they were important. And, I was telling my friend about this, and I'm like, yeah, those last like 50 to 75 pages were so good, probably because one of these two characters suddenly became like a major player, and I'm like, I really enjoyed them as a character. They were dynamic and interesting and not boring. So them stepping forward and taking such an important role made them interesting, made that last 50 to 75 pages interesting. I was invested, actually. Because up until then, it was very much the reason it took me twice as long to read this was because the characters were so boring. And I want to reiterate, this is not a poorly written book. This is a very well written book. But if you heard me describe these characters and describe this magic system and went, oh, this sounds super interesting. The magic system and the world are super interesting. I found the characters extremely dull. And it's not even that they were one-dimensional. It was just that I was bored with them. Like, I appreciated that it felt like college kids. So it didn't feel like I was reading about teenagers who were just claiming they're older. Excuse me, I am yawning like crazy. It didn't feel like we were reading about teenagers who were just claiming to be older. It really did feel like we were reading about 19, 20-year-olds. But yeah, it was just... I feel bad about this because I do think the book is well written. I do think it has an audience. I do think there are people who have read this book and loved it. That just wasn't me. And I'll tell you right now, I read the blurb for book 2. And it's very much a case of I need to go into a bookstore and see whose names are on the chapters. Because if we are following Emery and Baz again, I'm going to cry. I'm not out of happiness. It will be a very hard sell for me to read it because they weren't interesting. Baz got there, sort of. He got less gray? But no. There were like 2 interesting characters, and then Baz, who got better. Not perfect, just better. So with that harsh criticism, my recommendations for interesting magic, and yes, all 8 of the recommendations today are basically a list of some of my favorites. The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. It is the one with all of the Welsh mythology, and you've got a family full of one kind of magic, and the Aglenby boys have different kinds of magic, and it's all super fun. You have Tempest and Slaughter, which is technically a Chi Dancer, by Tamora Pierce, because I'm like, oh, I can't put Lady Elena again, so instead I put a book set in that world. But I do love the magic in this one. This one follows... are they technically at university in that one too? It covers a much broader timeline. Oh, what is his... I can't remember his name. It is a character who later on uses a alias as his primary name, but this is him before the alias. My brain escapes me at the moment. Graceling by Kristen Cashore. magic automatically makes you good and special and important. Main character has, I can't remember if it's weapon magic or death magic. Either way, she winds up basically being a hitman and doesn't really like it. And Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. Honestly, Howl's magic is the least interesting, and Sophie has the best magic of all. Even better than Galcifer. But I have talked about Howl's Moving Castle before. I greatly love it. And then for Survivor's Guilt. You know what I realized when I was making this list is that a lot of the books I deeply love have Survivor's Guilt. So we have Sandry's book by Tamora Pierce. This is set in Imelin, as opposed to Tempest and Slaughter, which is set in the world of Tortall. This is set in Imelin, and all four? Well, Triss doesn't have Survivor's Guilt, but the other three main characters have some form of Survivor's Guilt. Briar's is different from the other two, but Sandry and Daja both have a very typical case of Survivor's Guilt. Triss doesn't, and Briar has a different kind. Oh, excuse me. Deed of Paxenarian, the Survivor's Guilt is not immediate. It takes place during the course of it. It does build up a lot of Paxenarian as a character. If I could justify doing a stream on that one, I would, but it is such a long book. Even if I break it up into its like 3 component books, they're massive. And it's like that could be 2 months on its own. It's just all of the Deed of Paxenary. Percy Jackson and the Olympians, The Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan. Survivor's Guilt. Well, I guess all 3 of your main characters have it. Grover, Annabeth, and Percy. But it's a reoccurring thing through the whole Olympian series is some form of Survivor's Guilt from various characters. And then Lockwood and Company, The Screaming Staircase by Jonathan Stroud. Your main character has Survivor's Guilt, but it's tempered because she also has the person who told me to go in and do the thing and got all my buddies killed was dumb and told me to go in and do the thing and got all my buddies killed. So it's that kind of Survivor's Guilt. Where it's like, we did all the things, you were supposed to check all the other things, and you didn't, and you just ran. I do find it interesting. Most of these are different in some way, shape, or form. Some of them are mistakes that were made by the actual character caused the guilt. Some of them are just life happening. Some of them are other people made mistakes that caused all of the death. But like, even when I was thinking, well, I like Redwall and Castaways the Flying Dutchman, and those both have that. I like a lot of, excuse me. Oh, jeez. I like a lot of books about, like, knights and King Arthur and stuff. Those also can, not all of them do, but they can have Survivor's Guilt. Even things like Ella Enchanted, or what's the one I adore? The Two Princesses of Bamar. If I haven't talked about that one before, let's talk about that one. That one is an absolute delight because the Survivor's Guilt happens even though the person isn't dead yet. proving survivor's guilt is a state of mind. So Two Princesses of Bamar is written by Gail Carson Levine, the same woman who wrote Ella Enchanted and all of its related novels. And it is about two sisters, the bold and brave one who just wants to go on adventures and be exciting, and the quiet little homebody who just kind of wants to fade into the background, maybe marry well, but mostly just is content to hear her sister tell stories. And there's a sickness, man, I wish I could remember what it's called, the Grey Death? I feel like it's called the Grey Death. That occasionally sweeps around, and if you get it, you will die. Basically. But it is a slow disease, a wasting and a withering, not a fast thing. And so, of course, the sister that gets it is the bold and brave one who just wants to go on adventures. I'm basically summarizing this book. I'm so sorry. But it is why I like it, because Little Miss Fieldmouse Princess doesn't want her sister to die. Would be fine if it was her. Is not fine because it's her sister. And does the craziest thing ever and goes out on an adventure to find a cure. That is the general premise of the whole thing. But the whole time where she's like going on this quest and doing these things and being brave and trying to channel her sister, she feels guilty because she wishes she had been the one who got the disease instead of her sister. And there are some delightful characters in that. The mage, Rice, is possibly one of my favorite mages. Because he is both cunning and silly and encouraging, and he's just a delight. That is one of those books that I have read so much. I have it as a paperback. I got it from the library. Its spine is in terrible shape, but both my copy of Ella Enchanted and my copy of Two Princesses of Bamar have old covers. Actually, hang on. Did they change the cover of Two Princesses of Bamar to match the new... hang on. Let me turn that off. Did they change it? Did they change the cover? Oh, they did! Twice. Gosh darn it. Okay, so I'm going to say this. There was a time where all of Gail Carson Levine's novels had photographs on them of people. That was fine. It wasn't my favorite, but I could deal. But before that, there were these gorgeous paintings. So, like, Ella Enchanted had a painting on it, and Two Princesses of Bamar had a painting, and they were amazing. I adored those covers. Those are the covers I have. And I remembered that there was a prequel that was written, and I remember that its cover is very different from the cover I have, and so I'm like, oh, did they redo the cover of Two Princesses of Bamar to match the prequel? Yes they did. And I'm not completely okay with it. Hang on, let's see. Yeah, the 2013 edition. I am not okay with that. Let's see. Where is my original publication? Is it the 2001? No, it's probably that one. It's probably the one that says it's a scholastic book. Hang on, let me look. Go away. Let's see. Why can't we order this by... It looks... excuse me. It looks like it was originally published in 2001. I could go find mine. But the fact that there's a library binding from 2001 implies that that is probably when it came out. Let's see, that's the EOS binding. Yeah, no, this was a great book. I adored it. I still do highly recommend it. But it is a book of survivor's guilt, even though no one is currently dead. I love how it's like you might also enjoy these books, and it's like all of the Byron books. Of course I like all of those. I read all of those. It's just like, hey, you like Gail Carson Levine? I bet you like Shannon Hale. It's almost like I read these two authors a lot growing up. And The Frog Princess by E.D. Baker. Yep. Okay, sorry. I will stop looking at that, because you know me, I do get sucked down to just a quick Google rabbit hole. But yeah, I found out that I like a lot of books that have survivor's guilt in them. And I will say, if you... Other people may like these characters more than I do. Other people may, in fact, not find these characters boring and may actually find them interesting. As I said, I don't think it's a badly written book. I absolutely adore the magic system and the world. The plot is kind of predictable, but that's not a bad thing. I've said that before. I have no issue with the plot. It's really is just the characters I have a problem with. And it's not that they are problematic characters, it is that they are boring. And also, no, I'm not going to tell you who the two interesting characters are. And it's not because I'm trying to be all like, aw, why are you withholding this information? It's because if I told you who they were, that would be a little bit too spoilery, even though I've just like spoiled half the plot of Two Princes of Bamar, and I went on a rant about the plot of this book earlier. But yeah, I know I said I was going to read a wintry book, and I didn't. Instead, I read a book that I got for Christmas. In summary, I don't regret reading it, because those last, 50 pages really salvaged it. But I don't think I'll be reading the sequel anytime soon. I will say that. I don't think I could handle the sequel on the back of the first one. I may try to cherry pick from my books that I haven't read yet to see if I can tell by the description one that would be more of my jam than this one. I think I have What the River Knows, and so I may look into that one. Or I have a duology that I bought a while ago. I may look into that one too. Or I have Holly Black. There's always Holly Black. I usually enjoy Holly Black. But yeah, so welcome to the first. No. Is that actually the first book I've covered this year? Oh my gosh, am I a terrible person or what? Oh, don't tell me that was the first book I've covered. Oh, don't tell me that. That makes me feel so bad. Hang on. That is the first book I've covered this year. Oh no, I just read Hans Christian Andersen. Oh, welcome to the new year where I forget to read books, apparently. I will be reading, it'll be another first time read for 2 weeks from now. I hope everyone has a good night and a good rest of the week. And I will see you later. Good night.